Have you ever said something out loud, and in the very moment the words left your mouth, you felt as if you had just lost something that belonged to your inner world, an intention you had not yet had time to nurture, a fear you were not yet strong enough to name, a direction you had only dared to think about in silence? The strange thing is that no one actually hurt you, and yet you still felt weakened, as if a portion of your energy had slipped out of your hands simply because you spoke too soon. Eckhart Tolle points to something profound here. He teaches that almost all human suffering comes from the unconscious activity of the mind, from the ego's constant need to express itself, to be seen, to be validated. And one of the most subtle ways we lose our inner power is by speaking about what is still forming inside us before it has had the space to take root. Not because the world is cruel, but because the deeper part of you, the presence beneath the thinking mind, has not yet stabilized enough to stand firm against other people's reactions and expectations. There are things which, if spoken too early, change form, become distorted, or quietly lose their power. This video is not telling you to live closed off, to be secretive, or to distrust everyone. It is reminding you of a truth totally returned to again and again. The inner world needs to be protected by stillness at the right time. There are 5 things that a person who has matured inwardly learns not to reveal, not to hide, but to preserve their own wholeness. And if you stay with me to the end, the 5th one will completely change how you understand your own silence. Let's begin. The first thing to understand is why silence protects the inner world. Tolle was precise about this. He said, when you lose touch with inner stillness, you lose touch with yourself. When you lose touch with yourself, you lose yourself in the world. Most of our psychological wounds, he taught, do not come from what others do to us. They come from how completely we have lost contact with the still presence beneath our thought and how easily we give that presence away. Every time you speak about something just beginning to take shape within you, you allow the world to step into a space that should have belonged only to you. And sometimes a single careless reaction from another person is enough to destabilize something you had not yet finished building inside. The strange thing is that this damage does not arrive immediately. It seeps in slowly, like water through a crack in stone, until one day you realize you can no longer feel the original impulse at all. Tolle describes stillness not as the absence of communication, but as your essential nature. He wrote, "Stillness is your essential nature. It is the inner space in which the words on this page are being perceived and become thoughts. You are that awareness disguised as a person. When you remain silent at the right moment, you stop leaking that awareness outward. You bring the energy back, you hold it, and it is precisely in that holding that the inner world gains the space to reorganize itself. I once knew a woman named Lena who shared every emotion she experienced. When she began meditating, she told all her friends. When she wanted to change jobs, she told the entire office. When she was healing from a relationship, she brought every thought out for advice. And the more she talked, the more lost she became. The more she explained, the less certain she felt, until she could no longer tell the difference between her own voice and the echo of everyone else's. One day she said something I have never forgotten. She said, maybe the only thing I need to do is stay silent long enough to hear myself. And when she began to do that, what had been chaos became clear. Her inner world simply needed space to put each piece back where it belonged. This is the mechanism. When you speak too much, you hand the authority to interpret yourself over to the world. When you are present and still, you reclaim it. That silence does not make you smaller. It makes you whole. The second thing you learn not to reveal is your plans and goals. This is not about modesty or hiding. It is about energy. Tolle taught that the ego is always seeking to strengthen its sense of self, and one of its favorite strategies is to talk about what it is going to do. Because talking about a goal produces a small, immediate hit of satisfaction. It feels like progress, but it is a counterfeit. He described how the mind seeks identity and validation everywhere it can find it, and how speaking about a plan before acting on it allows the ego to claim the reward before the work has even begun. You have felt this. You share an important plan, and the moment you speak it, you feel as if you have already completed part of the work. That feeling is precisely the problem. The energy that should have gone into doing the thing has been discharged into talking about it. If people praise you, you feel excited, and the urgency fades. If they doubt you, you feel discouraged and the drive collapses. Either way, the fuel that should have powered the beginning has been spent. A man named Aaron once told me he was endlessly creative but never finished anything. Every time he had a new idea, he immediately told his friends, hoping for feedback. The more he talked, the more excited he became by their reactions, while in reality he did nothing. When the excitement faded, so did his motivation. I asked him once, why not do it first and talk about it later? He laughed, a little embarrassed, and said, because every time I talk about it, I feel like I've already done half of it. That was exactly it. He had spent all his energy on words instead of action. What should have grown in silence was burned up in instant validation. Your plan is a seed. It does not need an audience. It needs soil. It needs darkness to form roots before it reaches upward. Too much light, the gaze of others, does not nourish it. It dries it out. The third thing you learn not to reveal is your fears, insecurities, and hidden wounds. This one is more delicate because we are told that openness means sharing everything, that to speak our pain is to heal it. But Tolle taught something more nuanced. He described the pain body, the accumulation of old emotional pain that lives inside us and feeds on more pain. And he was clear that not everyone in your life has the presence required to be near your pain without amplifying it. When you hand your fear to someone who is still completely identified with their own pain body, they cannot hold it. They project their own fear onto it. And you walk away carrying not only your own wound, but theirs as well. I once knew a woman named Mira who carried a constant fear that she was never good enough. Whenever the anxiety rose, she turned to a coworker who tended to panic on her behalf. When Mira said she feared being judged, the coworker said, yes, the bosses really are watching everyone. When Mira admitted she felt unstable, the coworker said, I've always thought you seemed too tense. Within weeks, vague feelings had hardened into absolute truths in Mira's mind. Not because they were accurate, but because they had been amplified through someone operating entirely from their own unexamined pain. Tolle's teaching here is simple. Fear is not something to broadcast. It is something to meet with presence. He said the pain body cannot survive the light of your consciousness. When you stay with your fear in stillness, when you feel it without running and without narrating it to everyone around you, you are bringing the light of awareness to it directly. And that is how it actually dissolves. Not through endless venting, through presence. Inner strength does not come from having no fear. It comes from the ability to sit beside it in stillness without an audience. The fourth thing you learn not to reveal is what you are no longer choosing to pursue. When you decide to leave a path, a job, a relationship, a version of your life, that is not failure. Tolle would say it is consciousness withdrawing from an old form so that something new can emerge. But this phase is extremely fragile because the people around you can only see the old version of you. They have built their image of you around it, and they feel safe when you stay in the role they have assigned. So when you speak too early about leaving, they pull you back, not out of malice, out of their own discomfort with change. A man named Daniel worked as a software engineer for 8 years, good at his job, solid income, moving in the right direction by every external measure. But inside, his energy was draining away. He was running on inertia. One evening, he told a close friend he wanted to move into creative work. The friend said immediately, "Are you crazy? Your job is stable. Why would you leave?" One sentence, seemingly caring, threw him into doubt. He forced himself to stay another full year just to prove he was not unstable. The result was burnout and a complete collapse. What he regretted most was not the lost time. It was being pulled away from his own deepest knowing, simply because he had spoken too soon. Tolle taught that the most important inner movements happen quietly. There are chapters you close without an announcement. There are paths you leave without explanation. Not everyone is ready to witness you change, and their reactions say nothing about your path. They only reflect their own fear. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for the old version of yourself and the new one being born is to turn quietly, without a word. And now the fifth one, the one I told you to wait for, because it goes against almost everything you have been taught about joy and success. The fifth thing you learn not to reveal is your achievement, your money, and your success. We are told that joy should be shared, that success should be celebrated, that results should be displayed. But Tolle pointed to something most people miss. He taught the difference between the persona, the social mask we present to the world, and the true self, the presence beneath it. And success, when you speak about it too soon, gets pulled out of the quiet domain of the self and handed over to the persona, where it becomes fragile, dependent on approval, vulnerable to comparison and envy. A friend of mine built her career from nothing. When she bought her first home, she shared the news excitedly with a group of friends. Their response was not celebration. It was half-joking remark. "So you're rich now, someone must have helped you. Let's see if you can keep it." None of it was meant cruelly, but it planted something. Her success suddenly felt heavy. She began to feel pressure to keep proving herself, to keep achieving in response to invisible expectation. A moment that should have belonged purely to quiet joy was now tangled in energy she never invited in. Tolle wrote that all genuine creation, all genuine power, comes from a place of inner stillness. He said all artists, whether they know it or not, create from a place of inner stillness, a place of no mind. Success that is spoken too early gets pulled out of that stillness and into performance. Every compliment makes you want to maintain the image. Every trace of envy makes you waver. And within days, the pure joy of what you accomplish becomes a burden you never wanted. The psychology confirms that when you publicize success too early, the mind shifts from intrinsic motivation, the quiet satisfaction of the work itself, to extrinsic validation, the need for approval. And from that moment, You are no longer listening to yourself, you are listening to the crowd. Inwardly mature people tend to be quiet about their achievement, not because they are hiding, because they understand that what is connected to the true self needs privacy to keep its strength. A flame carried out into the wind too early gets shaken before it can grow. But a flame kept in a warm, enclosed space burns until nothing can extinguish it. True success does not need bright light. It illuminates itself through its quality. It does not need to be explained. It only needs to be lived. And here is where all five of these come together into something deeper. Because there is a final stage Tolle pointed to, where silence is no longer something you do as a strategy. It becomes something you are. When a person lives from presence, from the true self rather than the anxious, seeking ego, the need to reveal simply falls away, not through effort, through wholeness. You no longer share your plan because your mind is quiet and focused. You no longer broadcast your fears because you are meeting them directly in stillness. You no longer announce what you are leaving because you are turning quietly. You no longer display your success because you are living it rather than proving it. Tolle described people who reach this state as becoming almost transparent. He said, when someone becomes transparent, something shines through that person that has nothing to do with their personal history. Their presence is felt more clearly than any words could convey. There is a beautiful image for this. A blacksmith heats metal in a forge. When the fire is small, it crackles loudly. But when the furnace reaches its highest temperature, it becomes silent. That silence is not weakness. It is power that is fully stabilized. A person living from presence is the same. The deeper they go, the quieter they become, and their stillness no longer creates distance. It creates a kind of gravity. People are drawn to them precisely because they are not trying to attract anyone. They feel safe because a person needs nothing from them. This is what Tolle pointed to as the end of suffering. The moment you no longer need the world to validate who you are because you have found something stable enough underneath that requires no validation at all. So strength was never in what you say. It was always in the ability to stay connected to yourself, to the quiet presence beneath the noise, in a world that constantly demands your voice. By holding back these five things, you are not closing yourself off. You are giving what is growing inside you the space to ripen at its own rhythm. You are protecting the stillness that is your deepest nature. And eventually, you will discover what Tolle spent his life pointing toward, that silence is not something you practice, it is something you become. And when you no longer need to reveal, you have arrived at a quiet, immensely powerful freedom, where what matters most is not what you say, but who you have become. If this video helped you understand the power of protecting your inner world, leave one word in the comments. Stillness, if something in you is ready to go quieter. Presence, if you felt the truth of this. Whole, if you recognize where you are headed. And if you want to go deeper into these teachings, into what Eckhart Tolle discovered about presence, the ego, and the stillness that is your essential nature, subscribe to Master's Podcast, because this is not the end of the conversation. It is where it actually begins.